Hello and welcome to Global Southward Live updates on the Venezuela situation. And my name is Ismail Okwe. We're going to look at what's really happening in Venezuela right now as the country has no president. And what we know so far is that the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, has been captured. The US military carried out a large-scale strike in Venezuela that led to the capture of the president and his wife. And also there's an interim leadership where Venezuela's Supreme Court ordered Vice President Delcy Rodriguez to assume the role of interim president to maintain continuity. Also, the world leaders are sharply divided. Some are welcoming steps toward the change, while others condemn the US operation as illegal and a dangerous precedent. Tensions, military presence, and uncertainty are just taking over Venezuela currently. And on the ground, we have a lot of Venezuelans who are uncertain as to what's going to happen to them. Ordinary Venezuelans are caught in heightened uncertainty, and the fears continue with fears of violence, displacement, protest. And last night, Venezuela was quiet, and currently, we don't know what is happening in the country. We have Salome Bea Veles, who is going to join us on our live. Hi, Salome.
Hi, Ismail. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's nice to have you here. Can you tell us which country are you in currently?
Yes, so I am in Medellin, Colombia, which is
Mhm.
where I was born and raised. Yes.
Okay. And what's the feeling and the mood in Colombia after the capture of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela?
Well, it's definitely celebratory. Colombia has probably bared the brunt or the highest impact of the Venezuelan crisis, especially since 2014. About a third of those Venezuelans who have been displaced or forced into exile from the country have actually come to Colombia, which is, a bordering nation of Venezuela. And we Colombians remember a prosperous Venezuela. We remember, the nation of Venezuela as our sister nation, definitely historically. So the sentiment here in Colombia is definitely one of celebration. Although I do know that in Venezuela it's quite different, but everybody here in Colombia, regardless of political parties, they're celebrating that what they deem as the Maduro dictatorship has come to an end. Although there's definitely dissent as to if the way that it came about was right or wrong.
Can we separate the way it was done and also Maduro's style of leadership and the so-called authoritarianism that's going on in Venezuela?
Mm, yes. Well, you asked if we could separate the way it was done from Maduro's leadership.
Yes, because some people are happy, but in the same vein, the way he was taken out, well, it's unconstitutional, as everyone is saying. It's crossing the line when it comes to international laws and all of that. But
Mhm.
can we separate the two, or it's just a win-win?
Oh, I see. Well, it depends on who you ask. I think that you can, and the feelings that I've gathered from a lot of people here in Colombia, as well as from my Venezuelan colleagues and friends. Yes, you can separate them, regardless of who carried out the operation. A lot of Venezuelans are just happy that Maduro has been sacked. Although obviously it's different to sack him as a leader than to sack his political party or the system that has been so deeply entrenched in Venezuela for the last 26 years or so. Um, but I do think that you can separate it. A lot of people are very hopeful right now that they're going to be able to come back to Venezuela. And yeah, I do think that you can separate it.
Well, we have hundreds of people in prison in Venezuela just because they are against Maduro. A lot of others, even politicians who were against his election win in 2024, are also held in jail. We have a lot of diasporan Venezuelans who are also outside the country just because they are trying to escape the authoritarian regime of Nicolas Maduro. And clearly, the whole world is divided. Some
Mhm.
believe that Maduro is not an, I mean, an elected president. Others also think, well, he deserves to be there. And a lot of Venezuelans in Venezuela are also divided because the others, the other half who can speak, who can say anything about Maduro's regime, are afraid that they could be jailed, while those who are able to speak are supporting him openly. But currently, we realize that in Venezuela, there's some quiet. And some also are afraid that there could be protests that could
Mhm.
even end the entire regime of Maduro, because currently the acting president by the Supreme Court order, Delcy Rodriguez, is already saying she's in charge. She has come out to say she doesn't support the U.S. action in the country. We also have opposition leaders also saying they want to be in charge because they are the ones who are supposed to be in office, like Machado and the rest. Then Trump is also saying they can't take any chances for someone to take over Venezuela, and they're going to run it. He literally used the word run it until proper transition takes place. Now,
Mhm.
if you've heard from people in Venezuela, what is also the mood like? Are they still in celebratory mood like it is in Colombia, or is a different reaction you are getting from Venezuela?
Well, in Venezuela, we know that a third of the Venezuelan population supports the Maduro regime, or what some deem a Maduro dictatorship and the regime of Maduro. And it's definitely very divided in terms of leadership. I want to go back to what you were saying. It's definitely paradoxical because on the one hand side we have Trump, who says that the U.S. will run Venezuela, and he called it the Venezuela Plan. He explained that Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is of Cuban descent, will be in charge of this Venezuela project, which of course will include the oil company and the oil reserves that Venezuela has. And the energetic transition is what they're calling it. And he's doing that with Delcy Rodriguez, who is the current vice president under Maduro, and who is expected to be in charge of the country while Maduro faces his criminal charges in New York. So it is definitely paradoxical for me, especially because on the one hand side, you have Donald Trump saying that that he will not work with anybody from the Maduro government, and being very critical of the Maduro regime, of course. But now we're getting news that he's actually working with the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, in this transitional period. He also dismissed that Maria Corina Machado, the opposition winner, or the opposition leader, and the recent Nobel Peace Prize laureate, was fit to govern the country. He called, he noted that she doesn't have the support of the people to run the country. But the biggest question right now for me as a journalist and as a Colombian is what will happen with Edmundo Gonzalez, who the US did recognize back in 2024 as the legitimate winner of the elections, who had to run in place of Maria Corina Machado, because Machado was barred from running for political office in what some claim is, political repression. But Edmundo, according to the Venezuelan opposition and many countries, including the United States, did win the 2024 presidential elections. So right now, we are not sure what his role will be in this, and if at all Trump and the Trump administration has spoken to Edmundo Gonzalez.
Yes, and clearly, Delcy Rodriguez is speaking with the Americans, and I see a lot of reports saying the opposition are creating some conspiracy theories that maybe she was in on it even before it happened, and already there's a lot of uh, white smoke around this whole issue. That did the Venezuelan authorities know about the coming of the Americans? Did they not know who is to benefit, and what's really the main what's the carrot stick here? Is it that Trump had all this planned all along with the Venezuelan government or not? And if there's even going to be another election, how is it going to go? How is the constitution going to play out? And these things have happened before in the past with other countries that the US has ever gone into. But hearing from the people would make more sense. And we have a video from the ground in Venezuela currently where we want to listen to and then see exactly what's happening in Venezuela from the ground. While I get this video, I just want to hear from you. Uh, you are saying Colombia is celebratory, and we've heard from other leaders in Latin America who are really not in support because, as
Mhm.
the saying goes, if old people, or I mean, this is a very local saying. I'm in Ghana right now. It says, if old people hear about death, then they get scared. So,
Mhm.
what about other countries that have already been mentioned by Donald Trump, like Cuba, even Iran, and
Mhm.
also other Latin American countries? Because some of them have also been tagged as authoritarian in their
Mhm.
approach to governance.
Mhm.
What are you hearing as a journalist with Latin American reports? What are you
Mhm.
getting from the ground in these countries like Cuba and other neighboring countries of Venezuela?
Yeah, well, Colombians and the Colombian population, I want to start there. They are celebrating, but the Colombian head of state, President Gustavo Petro, is definitely not. He condemned the attack, or what he calls an attack, from the US in Caracas. But he was joined by other leaders, including Brazil's Lula da Silva, who called it, a violation of international law. And in Argentina, however, we have Javier Milei, who has been celebrating um, this momentous occasion, is what he calls it, because he thinks of it as a way of fighting crime and fighting terrorism in the region. And that is a very important point, because Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, is not arguing that he had to sack Maduro because he was a dictator. He's actually arguing that he had to complete this operation because Maduro was a criminal, because Maduro was a drug lord, basically, and had been smuggling illegal drugs and illegal weapons into the US. So that is a very important differential point, because I think that takes the conversation away from if a country can legitimately, quote unquote, invade another one if they don't agree with their leadership, but it takes it into the more judicial and criminal aspects of the conversation. We also have a very interesting conversation going on in Chile at the moment, because incumbent Gabriel Boric also condemned what happened yesterday morning in Caracas. He said that it was against international law and the UN Charter, and called for diplomatic ways to restore Venezuelan democracy. But President-elect Jose Antonio Cast has celebrated the American interference in Venezuela, and he is to take office in March. So definitely a very polarized region. But in Europe, we've had basically the same sentiment from all sides. From European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she mentioned that this transition had to be done democratically, and called for respect for the rule of law and for the UN Charter. So did Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in Italy, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez in Spain. The European sentiment is very unified and uniform. Whereas here in Latin America, it's definitely quite dispersed. But I'm sure that is a consequence of Latin America having, again, bear the brunt of the Venezuelan crisis and Venezuelan migration and so on. And now in terms of Cuba, well, Cuba has, of course, condemned what happened. Cuba and Venezuela are historic allies. Venezuela has served Cuba in helping it maintain its economy for the last 26 years, since Hugo Chavez assumed office in 1999. And so Diaz-Canel, the president of Cuba, has denounced the attack as imperialist and illegal, of course.
Okay, so the next questions I have for you are what can happen next in Venezuela and who are the next candidates to be president? But before that, let's get some reactions from people in Venezuela. This was compiled by our journalists in Latin America.
¿Qué está pasando hace horas del bombardeo en Venezuela? No es casual, más allá de que Maduro, evidentemente, con un tema de lo que se ha prorrogado, no ha obedecido a su pueblo, le ha dado esa justificación al gobierno del norte.
Claramente hoy asistimos a un punto de inflexión de la historia de los pueblos de América Latina por la agresión que ha sido víctima nuestro vecino bolivariano.
Bueno, hoy vinimos por un compromiso ético, moral, de justicia y solidaridad, porque estamos indignadísimos y muy tristes por lo que está ocurriendo, que no es una obra de arte y magia, es la invasión, la agresión de Estados Unidos, del anglosionismo, contra um pueblo hermano.
Eu acho importante a gente estar aqui para se manifestar contra esse absurdo, essa coisa escandalosa que é a invasão dos Estados Unidos em relação à Venezuela e o sequestro de Nicolás Maduro, o bombardeio dos Estados Unidos contra a Venezuela.
Well, these are some views from people in Latin America, and some are saying this is an invasion. Some are saying it's absurd, and they think it's right to come out. And in the same vein, they don't support, some of them don't support the actions of Maduro. However, they still think it's an invasion, and an invasion shouldn't be allowed to happen because this could happen in their countries, in their economies, in their constitutional, I mean, dispensations as well. But the next question I am going to ask is what is going to happen next, or what may happen next in Venezuela currently?
Well, we don't know. We don't really know. For now, we know that Marco Rubio is to assume this leadership position in leading the Venezuela project and reinstating the nation's democratic principles. That is what the U.S. administration has said. But again, he's planning on doing this with Delcy Rodriguez, who is the vice president, who was the vice president under Maduro. So it's very confusing. We don't know what will happen with Maria Corina Machado. We don't know her whereabouts right now after the December 10th Nobel Peace Prize ceremony in Oslo that she was able to attend. We haven't known her whereabouts since then. She has proclaimed freedom for the Venezuelan people. She did release a press release yesterday talking about how now is the time to act, that her team will be mobilizing different civilian groups and different civilians in Venezuela to start this transition. But we don't know if she's actually going to be allowed to take office or to take power. The same goes with Edmundo Gonzalez, who, again, the United States did recognize as Venezuela's legitimate leader in 2024. We haven't heard from him beyond, with the Maria Corina's press release. And so we don't really know. For now, we just know that U.S. President Donald Trump has said that the U.S. will run Venezuela until there's a judicious transition of power. Judicious, of course, according to his principles. And we don't know what will happen with the Venezuelan opposition. They have not been clear as to if they're in talks with the U.S. government or so on.
So clearly, we don't know what's going on. We don't know who is going to take over. We just know there's an acting president, that's Delcy Rodriguez, who the Supreme Court has ordered to sit in as acting. And Parliament is still in session. We still haven't heard from Gonzalez and Machado if they're going to come back. We don't know if there's going to be another election. But these are the clear candidates who may want to contest if there's an election. If there's also going to be an election, then we don't know if the Electoral Commission is going to be an independent one, because with the United States running it, does that mean if things don't go as they expected to, they're going to cancel an election? Does that mean they're going to remove members of parliament? Does that mean they can remove the acting president just because maybe they didn't do what she wants them to do? Now, these are some of the uncertainties that are around the action of the United States, because if they claim that because something is not done well, then they are going to take over and that they can't take chances for someone
Mhm.
to take over Venezuela. And that means they are now going to act as the judge, the jury, and even the people. And that
Mhm.
makes it very, very, very confusing.
Yes, well, there was a joke going around social media where people were asking if now we're going to need a US visa to enter Venezuela. So there's definitely lots of reactions in that front. And I also want to go back to what you were mentioning earlier about the American influence in Latin America. Of course, since the time of the Cold War, there's been this concept thrown around of the Latin America being the backyard of the United States, right? And that is definitely a concern for many, especially here in Colombia, where we have elections next year, which are very polarized, and one candidate is from the quote unquote Maduro supporting party, and the other ones are right or center right. And so our fear, and my fear as a Latin American, is definitely if the US will intervene in these elections if a candidate wins that they don't like. Of course, that is my biggest concern at the moment, especially as we're gearing up towards elections. But yeah, definitely. Again, the difference between intervening against a regime and intervening to capture a criminal, I think that is a line that the U.S. has been very careful not to cross in terms of their language and in terms of their actions, because we know, of course, that Nicolás Maduro was then transferred to a New York City prison, and he is expected to appear before a judge as early as tomorrow.
Mm. And indeed, we've seen regime changes, and this is very different. This is of a different nature. We saw Syria, where there was also a lot of authoritarianism going on, and there were a lot of political prisoners. All of them were freed after the country was taken over by some militant groups who were against the authoritarian regime of Assad. And for Maduro, yes, he's been captured because of drug-related offenses, we'll call it that. And there are still a lot of people who have been held because of political dissent. And if the US is able to get them to be released, then we know that the interference of the US is beyond just the drug trafficking. And they also have gone into the internal politics of the people. But so far, we've not heard about the release of people from jails. We've not heard about a constitutional change. We've not heard about anything like that, and I'm sure we are all listening and waiting to see what's going to happen next in Venezuela.
Yes, well, I think that the US, that then is when they have to start working with the opposition, because the opposition's talking point, one of its main talking points, is first bringing the Venezuelan children back home, and it refers to those who have been forced into exile in the widespread Venezuelan diaspora, which has been the largest diaspora, the largest exiled group of individuals, second only to the Syrian crisis. And the other talking point for the opposition has been taking these political opposition members out of prisons and restoring plurality. And so if the US wanted to do that, and if the US wanted to hold true to its idea of reinstating a democracy in Venezuela, I think that the first people that they should talk to are definitely the opposition leaders who have been talking about these inside networks and this work to be done in the country.
Okay, thank you very much, Salome Bea Velez of the Latin America Report from Colombia. And we'll come back to you, and thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you, Ismail.
Thanks. Okay, so this is Global South Wales coverage of the Venezuelan uh, situation. We wanted to know what was happening on the ground. We spoke to some people on the ground. Our team in Latin America spoke to some residents of Venezuela, and also some other people in the Latin American region. I'm going to play a video from that work done by the Global South World team.
Lo que está pasando hace horas del bombardeo en Venezuela no es casual, más allá de que Maduro, evidentemente, con un tema de lo que se ha prorrogado, no ha obedecido a su pueblo, le ha dado esa justificación al gobierno del norte.
Claramente hoy asistimos a un punto de inflexión de la historia de los pueblos de América Latina por la agresión que han sido víctima nuestro vecino bolivariano.
Bueno, hoy vinimos por un compromiso ético, moral, de justicia y solidaridad, porque estamos indignadísimos y muy tristes por lo que está ocurriendo, que no es una obra de arte y magia, es la invasión, la agresión de Estados Unidos, del anglosionismo, contra um pueblo hermano.
Eu acho importante a gente estar aqui para se manifestar contra esse absurdo, essa coisa escandalosa que é a invasão dos Estados Unidos em relação à Venezuela e o sequestro de Nicolás Maduro, o bombardeio dos Estados Unidos contra a Venezuela.
Well, we'll be continuing with the live, and when we have updates, we're going to share them. Continue watching Global Southworld on all of our social media platforms. You can also visit www.globalsouthworld.com. I'm Ismail Okwe, and I'm out.